It is a 90s film. It's a true story. It circles around mothers. There are so many mums out there, so many women that sacrifice so much and are unseen for the great work that they do.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Crisp from Movieguide, and this is Coffee and Conversation with Joel Smallbone. Joel, you are starring in Unsung Hero about your family's inspiring true life story journeying from Australia to America. Tell us about the movie.
Unsung Hero is the definition of a passion project for me. It is a 90s film. It's a true story. It's a film about a mom and miracles and her migrating from Australia to the United States with 6 kids and one on the way, and all the kind of tragedies and triumphs that they faced along the way. It's ultimately our parents' story. And I co-wrote it, I co-directed it, but I play our dad in the film, which I think I've mentioned to you before, but I've dubbed a very expensive therapy session. But it really circles around our mum. It circles around mothers. Title, as you said, is Unsung Hero, and this idea that there are so many mums out there, so many women that sacrifice so much and are unseen for the great day in and day out work that they do. And so this is our small attempt to celebrate one of our great heroes, two of our great heroes, really, our mum and our sister, Rebecca St. James.
Joel, starring as your own father and stepping into his shoes, did it make you look at your parents' lives and the sacrifices they made differently?
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not in many ways? Luke and I were so young when we moved. I was shy of 10. And when we came, it was the film is kind of this adventure film. Yes, it's dramatic. Yes, it's funny. It's got all this sort of the humor of Australians and Americans and them sort of coinciding with each other. But when I lived it, I lived it as a child. And so I approached it in a very childlike way. And Mum was so great, which the film depicts, in making it all an adventure. Sleeping on beds made of clothes was adventure beds, and not having furniture in the house was you could play cricket in the house. And not having any money meant we could rake leaves and mow lawns, and we could put money back in, check payphones and put money back into the family fund. But then writing it and portraying Dad as someone now who's roughly his age when he moved, and sort of dropping into his psychology, 6 kids, 6 months pregnant wife, 16 suitcases, moving around the world, losing his job, no insurance, no furniture, no idea where the next meal is going to come from. It gave me such empathy, Cheryl, for him, that I think I've been lazy with my parents' story at some points, because it was just my version of it, and hopping into his shoes. Yeah, it's pretty redefining.
Your family went through many challenges. Describe what it was like growing up being financially poor, but spiritually wealthy.
Yeah. I love that that's part of what the film depicts, is this kind of oxymoron of feeling so physically unsafe, but emotionally and spiritually feeling so safe in our family. Or as you said, being so poor in so many ways, and yet seeing really the miraculous happen. We would pray these, we'd sit on the floor in the living room, we'd pray these very canted, visceral, unpoetic prayers about what we needed, and just seeing God do sort of radical things in our midst. It kind of, even as a child, it was very hard to grapple with. But I was also, one thing that I felt so strongly, both as a child and as an adult, even now, is that part of the miracle was the local community. Part of the miracle was being seen by the local church or the first grade school class who couldn't find out we weren't going to be able to give each other gifts in Christmas. And, we love Santa Claus. And so they partnered with Santa Claus to give us more gifts than we'd ever received. And it's the oxymoron of, like, having nothing in our house, but having all these beautiful Christmas gifts. And So it just, yeah, I think people were such a magical part of the miracle of what we experienced.
Describe some of the jobs that you guys had and looking for money as kids and things like that you remember.
When we first sort of arrived in Tennessee, I remember feeling the stress, starting to feel the stress of strain of like, oh, we don't have much. And this was the era of payphones, right? Such a nostalgic era, the 90s, you know. And that's what I love. What I love about this film is like it's the clothing, it's the music, you know, it's Jesus Jones and it's Rod Stewart and Lenny Kravitz and Seal and Amy Grant and Stryper and Michael W. Smith, you know. And then it's also pre-smartphone internet, you know. And so I remember when we stayed, there's a hotel in town that we had two rooms and eight of us piled into these two rooms. And they had free breakfast, and that was our only meal of the day. And they had payphones lined up in one of the areas, you know. And I remember every morning just going and checking the coin slots. And knowing that if there was money there, it would sort of go back into the family fund. And that turned into raking leaves and mowing lawns. That turned into cleaning houses. And that ultimately turned into us traveling with Rebecca as her road crew, as sort of the Australian version of the Von Trapp family, if you will. So those jobs, I think they knit us together as a family in a way that I don't think we'll ever really fully comprehend.
Talk about the emphasis and the importance of family, faith, and music in your family growing up. And looking back, do you feel like you can see God's hands in your lives then that kind of shadowed what you all are doing right now in your lives?
There's no doubt, you know. Hollywood Reporter put out a great quote early on, and the quote was turning struggle into adventure. I was actually reading about this a bit this morning, and I feel like that is kind of the upside down kingdom, if you will, this idea of how do we take, you know, lemons and make lemonade? And how do we take these confinements and actually turn them into the very beautiful fruit that is, you know, our future? And I think it's very fair to say if you didn't have this hard time of us, our family banding together, no pun intended, you wouldn't have the band, you wouldn't have For King Country, you wouldn't have this film, you wouldn't have us still, you know, the better part of 30 years on fighting to, you know, keep our family intact. We're not, you know, hear me when I say this is not a perfect film. This is not a pretty film. It's an adventure, but we did not want to make sort of a fluffy family Friday night film. We wanted to make a sort of dramatic, true to life, grounded picture. And still to this day, we are, you know, we're a family still navigating life, but we're doing it together. And if it weren't for those struggles, I don't think we'd be living the adventure that we're living now.
Mm. Unsung Hero is a family affair. Talk about the family members that are involved in the film.
Yeah, I don't really know how to do life any other way other than sort of invite family. So at very least, if you keep a close eye as you watch it, you're going to see a cameo basically from every one of my siblings and my parents even. My wife, Mariah, who, as you know, is my deepest partner in life and in crime. She was a co-producer on it. Brother Luke was a producer on it. You know, the band is sort of really looped into it as far as promoting it and getting the word out and developing it. And so, yeah, it's not only is it family on screen, but when you get behind the screen, you'll find that there's a lot of family. Our brother Ben was an associate producer on it, so there was, yeah, the family was very involved.
What was the most important things your parents did to cultivate a love, a friendship with Jesus in your hearts?
They loved each other really well, you know. I think, and still do. Um, as the saying goes, they'll know us by our love. But also, one thing that I've really recognized more than ever in my life is God and Jesus even had a lot to say, has a lot to say about the union of marriage. Whether it's, Jesus doing the sort of classic water into wine, first ever miracle, whether it's, Jesus using bride and groom as a great allegory for um, God and humanity, the bride and the groom. Whether it's even Paul saying to husbands, like, hey, lay down your lives for your wives, as Jesus did for his church. It just feels like marriage is, you cannot delineate the spiritual, the physical and the spiritual union of marriage and separate it from the union that God wants to have with humanity. And I think it's even written in areas where it's unwritten. For instance, Jesus was so avant-garde, and he makes this pretty outrageous statement at one point. He's like, hey, if you don't hate your mom and dad, or hate your brother and sister, you're not willing to be my disciple, basically. But he omits spouse. And there's something even in that omission to me that's like, oh, this man, he was, this is basically the only God-given institution is this idea of marriage. And he's pretty serious about it. And so I think the great acts of physical and even spiritual influence that mom and dad had over us was the way that they, in hardship, didn't perfectly do it, but they loved each other and love each other really well.
Joel, you and your younger brother Luke are the dynamic duo behind For King and Country, the 5-time Grammy award-winning super band. How does inspirational music reach a place in our hearts and our souls like nothing else?
I would argue that music is the language of heaven. There's something about a song, a love song can make you fall deeper in love with someone that you've always loved. A song that you heard in your childhood can make someone with Alzheimer's leap back into themselves. A spiritual song can tie us to God in such an incredible way. And it's been the privilege of our lives to focus on, um, inspiring people through this great um, heavenly language that is music. And I think it's very apt that we're doing this film now, and music is still so deeply tied. Like we've done this inspired by soundtrack for the movie, and there's more features on this album than any album we've ever done. It's sort of outrageous, and that feels very, yeah, very, very apt, I think, to have such a music focused film, and unsung hero even in the title. That is a song as well. It's kind of, that's the privilege of our lives to sing, really.
Absolutely. Joel, you starred now in Unsung Hero, Journey to Bethlehem, and Priceless. Are we going to see more?
I hope so. I hope so. I think, again, we've always been a visual band, and in music videos or on stage, it's always been very theatrical, and it just feels like, it feels like the right next step, to step into this new medium of marrying music and movies. I think my charge and my hope and my prayer, Cheryl, with the release of this film, which, by the way, comes out on our parents' 49th wedding anniversary, which is unbelievable, is that people will show up on that week. In music, you have years to promote an album, and in theatrical filmmaking, you know this very well. You have it should stay in theaters for a few weeks, but that first week is really what proves to the theaters themselves that they're going to keep this film around, and that people are showing up. And so, our hope is, just like with music, our hope is to continue to make music. Our hope is to continue to make movies. We've got several actually in development, but we're going to wait and see in a few weeks to see how the world responds. But I'll say this: you know, if you love your family, if you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're a child, if you love music, if you love the '90s, if you love miracles and prayer, like, I encourage you to come out, come out to the theaters and bring a family member and a friend on the 26th and beyond. We've dubbed the 26th Family Day. You've got Mother's Day, you've got Father's Day. It's like I feel like we need a good family day. So Family Day at the theaters. How about that?
This is a 90s film. What it makes the story and the message relevant today?
The 90s was this very simple time comparatively. Like I mentioned earlier, it was before cell phones and the rise of AI and the internet. And so I think there's something, as we sort of grapple with the power of this, some great power, but some terrifying power. We grapple with the power of, just being distracted minds. There's something really beautiful about the simplicity of sitting around the table together, banding together, fighting through life together. And I feel like it was the last simple era, And so there's something to learn. There's always something to learn from looking back and going, wasn't a perfect time by any stretch, but I think there's something to learn from the past.
Please welcome my big sister.
My dream is to be like you. It always has been.
If you enjoy videos that follow your values like ours and you want to help us continue, go to movieguide.org/donate, because we're actually a nonprofit. You may not know that, but we're working in Hollywood every day to help families have more choices that follows their values. And also subscribe right now.